talk about two things today. This is one of them, the tree plan, but also about the DCNR grant and where we are with that and what the plans are and what can we do to move that forward.
Well, as everyone may remember, we received, the City of Erie with 7 partners received a DCNR Community Watersheds and Forestry grant for $335,000. In the past month, we just received the, might even just be the last couple weeks, the executive contract, and we did meet with our DCNR contact. Her name is Valley, and she showed us how to use the grant portal and everything, and so I can, LEAF is one of the main partners on the grant. They have a lot to do with implementing it. The grant is for planting 3 tiny forests. We want to do 2 lawn conversions, which are planting either tiny forests or meadow plantings in what's formerly grass. And then we also have a large sum of money to like 100 or 150,000 just to plant trees. If you remember, we had requested an additional 250,000 for an inventory, so our grant application was over 500,000, but it was cut to 335. So we eliminated the tree inventory. And as I mentioned before, I have all my data from the last 19 years for every tree that I've inspected and cut down or planted or trimmed in Excel files. And so we also had a new GIS and a new data analyst person just start at the city. So they're going to work with me to get all my existing data into the GIS format to be able to map it in some kind of newfangled database. And so I think that will be a good baseline inventory information to start with. And then I'm going to be able on my phone to download with my phone information while I'm standing in the field with this new program. And there's also the option to allow access to trained volunteers, such as the Urban Forest Committee members. If they're out in the field and they want to download tree information too, you'll be able to do that, or like people who attend tree workshops and we've trained them. So there will be an option for like volunteers to enter data and myself to enter data. And so we're going to do that as the inventory section. And so that enabled, I think, like $56,000 that we will use for, I don't think we've officially decided how we want to redistribute that money for sure, but we can use it for like mapping, to map out some of all that baseline data, or we can use it for planting more trees or the workshops, or however it turns out that we need to spend that money. DCNR is pretty flexible as long as it's one of the already approved categories that we have in the grant.
Okay. And we can proceed with expenditures. All the expenditures we've already done this year count toward it?
Yeah, we just have to go into the grant portal, and the first step is to do a work plan.
Okay.
And then DCNR, Steve Leskowski, our local Erie County Forester, will approve it, and then we can get it approved, and then once it's approved, we can request reimbursement. And we can also get 50% of the funds up front for working capital, because I know LEAF, as one of the main partners, is still a smaller group, and so it would be nicer to have some upfront money for them rather than working out of pocket, because they've been doing work, I think as far back as January. And so they have a whole bunch of work done to report. And so our 6-month report is actually due, even though I only got the contract 2 weeks ago, because it officially started January 1st, which is funny. And so I'll have to work on that. But the good news is we also have a person who has a new job is also taking on the job of helping with grant administration, Jackie Spry. So on some of the emails, I've been including her, so it won't just be me trying to keep up with everything. Jackie will also help keep us on track and can enter data if it's sent to her. So whenever like Leaf or any of the other partners send data, they can send it to myself and Jackie, and between the two of us, we should be able to get everything on track and keep going. And she's very organized, and she loves the DCNR grant portal because it's so organized, even though I hate it and I hate doing all that kind of paperwork. So I'm excited that Jackie's willing to help with the grant administration.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah, but she doesn't know anything about trees or how to do the projects. Like, that still falls to all of us.
That's
But
probably irrelevant.
yeah, but the paperwork is where I can use the help, and so that works out really well.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that. So we're in the process of moving forward. And I know Chris Dolance, he's one of the partners for Mercyhurst, and he wants to put in a tiny forest, I think somewhere on Mercyhurst property. And so he's excited to get moving on the project too. And I know I've seen a couple emails from Leaf folks about the tiny forest. So we need to have a tiny forest meeting connecting the tiny forest partners, because he is excited about getting started too. Because for the tiny forest projects, Paul, I don't know if you're familiar with them. I'll let John explain it. He's way better at it than me, but there's a lot of prep work.
Yeah, so tiny forests are a reforestation mechanism that was developed by a Japanese biologist named Miyawaki. After the war in Japan, the forests had been denuded, they'd cut down everything to support the Second World War effort. That everything, well, not everything, Japan is covered with trees, but most of it's on mountains that are too steep to deal with. And so they replanted after the war, but they planted monocultures. And after 20 years, they realized they'd screwed up. They didn't have the forest that they thought they would. They had all kinds of disease problems and pest problems, and because they planted all these monocultures. So Miyawaki developed a system to rapidly reforest areas, and the system was picked up by a fellow in India, another engineer who worked for Sony, which was the corporation that Miyawaki was contracted by. And they've planted thousands of tiny forests across India. Finally caught on in Europe 5 years ago or so, and now they're planting them all over Europe, and we've actually planted one here. It's in its second year. It's in its second year, yeah. And you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe how those trees have grown. Whereas all the trees that we've been planting around the community, one tree here, one tree here, one tree here, they tend to grow 6 inches to a foot maybe in a year, and we're happy when they finally poke out of their shelter. The ones in the tiny forests, they grew, literally, they doubled in size. And so the ones that were the taller seedlings that were 3 feet tall are now 6 feet tall. It's amazing in 1 year.
Yeah, it's really cool. When you drive down 38th Street, you can see it from the street.
Actually, you can stop and see it. I went to see it last Wednesday
Uh-huh.
because Chris came and talked to our Master Gardener program
Uh-huh.
earlier this month. He's a very good presenter, by the way, if anybody's looking for one. But he's very excited about the process. It is innovative, and the Master Gardeners were certainly excited about it. And it is very impressive when you go through that garden that's only been there
This is
less than 2 years. This
That's
is
right.
the second growing season, I
That's
think
right.
he said.
Maybe we should have an on-location meeting there.
I-
Check
We
it
should
out.
we should do
should.
that because
Yes.
it's inspirational.
That'd be fun.
Yes.
So the basic technique is that you prepare the soil. So you dig down, preferably 3 feet, but 2 to 3 feet. You excavate the soil. You mix in a lot of organic matter, which most tree planting things know you don't fertilize the trees when you plant them, but in this case you do. You mix in lots of organic matter into that soil, and so it can be compost if you're just doing it and then you're going to plant it, but better is to prep in advance, and you can put anything in there, wood chips, whatever, just so it's organic material that's going to break down over a period of time. And then you plant them very closely. The one in Mercyhurst, we planted 3 per square meter. Sometimes they'll plant up to 5 or 6 per square meter. And we also inoculate the soil with a couple buckets of forest soil to get the mycelium, the fungus that the trees depend on and communicate through. And so we take a couple of buckets. We took at Mercyhurst, we took like 2 5-gallon buckets of soil and scattered that as we mixed it and dug it up. And that creates an ideal growing situation. And typically, the tiny forests grow at a rate 7 to 10 times as fast as conventionally planted trees. So,
crazy.
yeah, it's
super
weird.
cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So in India, they've focused especially on it's all about planting native trees too. But in India, there's a lot of fruit-bearing native trees, and they focused on that because it's a means of providing food for people. And we've done some of that too. I know we're filling in with some pawpaws and the ones that didn't survive in the tiny forest Mercyhurst, and we had a really great response. We had 90% survival.
Wow, that's really good.
Of those seedlings till the rabbits came in after we pulled the shelters off and snipped a whole bunch of them. I mean, they're still surviving, but we had to reshelter
Tasty
them.
little trees,
Yeah, so, and we identified another site that Grace Rhodes, who's one of the staff at the Arboretum at Leaf, identified a site in the Sisters of St. Joseph Network neighborhood up at 25th and Wallace. There was a fire there that the house burned and they took it off, but they didn't prep the soil or anything. They didn't dig out the foundation or anything. So I'm thinking we might be able to get the redevelopment authority to work with us on that. And I'm going to approach them about that. The expense in the tiny forest project so far has been for the excavation. That's been the big expense.
To prep the soil.
Yeah, and the city has contributed wood chips for mulch and compost for soil emolument, and you have to tend the tiny forest the first 2 years, do a little bit of weeding. This spring, with a couple of volunteers from the college, weeded the one up at Mercyhurst. Took us half an hour or so with shovels. Mostly it was dock, red dock and burdock that were the survivors through the mulch. And you need to water them if you don't have the rainfall for the first couple of years. But last year worked out all fine, and that we planted them in a relatively damp spot there at Mercyhurst. So that avoided that. So watering for the first 2 years is an issue and a little bit of maintenance, but after that, then they just take care of themselves. They just grow. So some of the trees don't survive, of course. I mean, over time, they fade out, and
Yeah, and normally seedlings, individually planted only have a 50% survival rate. So 90% survival rate's really good.
yeah.
The trees like friends.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. So I'm hoping that we can proceed with this fall planting the one up at 25th and Wallace. Chris has got a site. Last time, Mercyhurst's contribution to that project was to pay for the excavation. They used their green funds for that. I'm hoping he can do that again. We supply the seedlings through the Keystone 10 Million Trees project that LEAF participates in, the ReLeaf project. So we can get virtually all the seedlings that we need, and a great range of native species. So if we can cover the cost of that excavation part of it, then We can plant lots of tiny forests, frankly.
Yeah, and this grant covers that expense for the 3 that we put in for.
Right.
And then another aspect of the grant is conducting some tree workshops for citizens, whether they're tree care workshops, how to take care of newly planted trees, or tree pruning workshops we could have. And it's a 3-year grant. It might even be 4 years. I don't remember off the top of my head. And so once we start getting some of the residential trees planted, then we can start scheduling workshops. And that's something that the Urban Forest Committee members can help out with too, is being at some of the workshops. And so that's the update on that grant.
Good.
Did Steph or Armando, you have any questions? Also, Jacob, can you hear me? The Zoom administrator? I don't have the computer mouse anymore, so I don't know how to check if somebody's in the meeting. We're all good? Okay, thank you. We got a thumbs up.
We can hear. It's all good information. And I just wanted to say again, congrats on getting that grant.
Oh, thank you. Usually I have like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 grants, so this is a huge one. So we're excited about it. And there's lots of partners involved. There's LEAF, like we mentioned a couple of times, and Mercyhurst. There's our West Bayfront. There's the Benedictine Sisters, even Northeast Borough, because it's not restricted to city limits, and so they're in the grant. I think for like, I don't know, I think 16,000. I think 8 from the grant and 8 that they matched, and then I think the Redevelopment Authority might be a partner. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but there was a lot of partners. But DCNR wanted the grant that way. They didn't want to fund a bunch of separate small grants. They wanted us to all work together and put in one large application. So that was exciting. It's an exciting project.
Yeah. Keep us posted what it is that we're supposed to be doing then.
I'm sorry, what was that,
I
Patty?
said keep us posted about what we are supposed to be doing and how we can support this very exciting project.
Yes, we definitely will.
Yeah, what can we as individuals, members of the committee, do to support what you're doing?
Well, I think we'll be able to ask you to possibly, if this is something committee members would like to do, we have to find a lot of sites to plant new trees. And so that usually involves walking neighborhoods and going door to door and knocking on doors and asking people if they would like a new tree. And in the past, when we've done like mass mailings saying you can get a tree if you reply, nobody replies. I've done mailings where they said, well, you're getting a tree unless you reply you don't want one. And then the trees start to get planted and then everybody doesn't want one, and then we have to scramble to find new sites. So the best method, even though it's time consuming, is to just walk the neighborhood door to door and ask people if they'd like a tree. But that's why we have partners with our West Bayfront, and like the Bayfront Eastside Task Force is always can help with stuff like that. So even though people haven't committed to the grant, there's still a lot of neighborhood groups like the Sisters of St. Joseph. There's a lot of groups out there and neighborhood watches we can contact, but that still might be something that Urban Forest Committee members could help with. Or we could, and 2 or 3 people can get together and go together. You don't have to go out there by yourself.
Well, how about if we look at, what best in our West Bayfront and the Sisters of St. Joseph, if we determine the areas that they function in, and then look at, that still leaves a large part of the city that's not covered. And of course, part of that city is Frontier and Glenwood, and we don't need to focus on them. Not that we don't want to plant trees there, but they've already got a lot of trees.
Yeah, and the grant prefers us to focus on
Low to medium income neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that's something that the committee could take on, is to identify the areas that are not covered by the neighborhood organizations, and identify planting sites, maybe identify some other partners in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, because what's helpful is when you talk to somebody face to face is that if they don't want a tree at all, a lot of times it's a maintenance issue where the tree gets too big, and so you can try to talk them into a smaller tree that's more manageable, that doesn't get so tall, or one that isn't as messy. Like some people don't like you know, the cottonwoods get a bad name because all their fluffies and, you know, just different things. And sometimes people don't like the acorns because they get all over the sidewalk. So one way is to try to talk them into a smaller tree. But then people who are willing to have a tree, if there's no utility lines, we want to try to talk them into the largest tree possible.
The biggest trees we can.
Yeah, and so that's where the face-to-face interaction really comes into play. And there's a lot of trees that are flowering trees. There's a lot of trees with nice fall color. It's, you know, so if you can find and then you can talk to the people about what they like and help us pick a tree that the individual property owner is really going to enjoy and like for their property. Mm-hmm. And with, you know, temperatures getting hotter and hotter, trees provide shade. And so I've had a lot of people who recently got permits to cut their tree down because it was old and dying or whatever. And now they're calling me saying, wow, my house is really hot. On the front of my house and on the porch, I really need to plant some new trees. I'm like, I know. So, you know, those type of issues, there's lots of benefits to trees. And so talking with people, you get a chance to explain it to them, because even though we know a lot about trees, the average person might not really know. And then there are a lot of renters also, so we could help get the landlord's information and then also reach out to try to talk to the landlord, because when they're a renter, they don't have the ability to make those decisions. And so they might not have time in their life to go take that next step, whereas the committee volunteers, we could do that.
That actually leads me to another issue related to trees and tree replacement, because I do live in Glenwood, and one of my neighbors, actually a couple of them, have lost limbs or trees recently, and wondered, is there a process for the city to help us replace those trees? And
yeah, there is. There's also there is money for other neighborhoods that don't qualify for this grant, and it's just out of my general fund. Okay. So I do have, but it's just more limited. There's only about $20,000 a year that goes towards tree planting in the other neighborhoods in the city. But we do have that option, and also some of the money that the grant funds that LEAF gets isn't always restricted to certain neighborhoods either, and so we can always work with them to try to get grant trees. But they don't always have the larger trees. They only get about 20 a year, so.
Yeah.
But there are programs, and so they would just need to fill out a tree planting application. Okay. And then I go out and inspect the site and recommend a tree, and again, talk with them to see what they would like, because we want to plant trees that people are going to like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that may be, in talking with one of the neighbors, that was one of the concerns, is getting a tree, not a little sapling, but getting a tree that's a little bit more mature. And perhaps if the city doesn't have necessarily the funds for that, but help in making some selections that would be smart. So kind of what
anybody can call me and ask me.
Well, and what this person was actually suggesting, because it is becoming a neighborhood concern, that we've lost a lot of limbs and trees have been removed and that sort of thing. So we were actually looking at possibly having a neighborhood meeting with a few of the interested parties to have someone come and talk about, these are the types of trees that may be your best bet.
Sure, that's what I do that also.
Okay, great. Then
we even can do, nobody's asked since COVID, but one of my favorite things to do in the spring is do tree walks, where you just walk through the neighborhood and talk to people about all their trees. And in the spring, it's especially nice because all the trees are starting to bloom or just getting their leaves, and so it's fun. But I haven't had a lot of requests for that lately, but that's always fun too. And then you go around and meet all your neighbors. And
okay. All right.
But I'd be happy to come to a neighborhood watch group or a neighborhood meeting and just talk to people too and help answer questions anytime.
All right, good. Thank you.
Okay, so if we were to do this, if individual committee members could take some time and stake out a neighborhood that needs some trees and talk to people, what do we need? We need some kind of a handout that tells them what we're doing. We need some kind of a
map.
Okay, a map. A documentation that you've talked to somebody and they say, okay, we'll take a tree.
We could have the tree applications and you can help them fill it out.
That's something you already have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then I can either mail them back copies or, we can follow up and talk to them.
Okay, so you can share with us those applications. And do we need something that identifies us as members of the committee or whatever, that, so that people,
Yeah, I just was thinking about that, because we have our city ID badges for employee IDs. I'll ask and see if I can get Urban Forest Committee member badges, just so that you're
that'd be
identified as a member, because I don't think they cost that much. Because it's not like ours give us access in the building, but we just need a little plastic card with your name and a photo. So I think I'll ask if we can get that. That would be nice for the committee to have.
Yeah, and did you mention that there would be training for those of us who wish to do this?
Yeah, we could go out together
Yeah,
in a
okay.
neighborhood.
Good.
The
No.
easiest way to do it is just go with me
Okay,
and then
great.
see how it's done. You
Sign
know?
me up. I love walking and talking.
what it sounds
Yeah.
like, that's the priority at this point, is to identify where we're gonna plant,
Yes,
right?
yeah, because we have a
Okay.
lot of money for planting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of other money. Like, we get CDBG money, 20,000, plus I have some general fund money, 20,000, plus we have this huge grant, plus, so we have a lot of money for planting.
Okay, that's different.
And do we have good money to maintain? Because all of us drive around town and we see the little tree tubes, and they're just stuck out there, and some of them have mulch, some don't.
This grant also, I think, we put in to mulch the trees, the second year. The trees are mulched at planting time. And I think we put in money for mulching the second year, and also for a whole bunch of gator bags,
Okay, good.
which helps homeowners
Yes.
keep the trees watered.
Yeah, I use those usually, so yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, we put that in the
Yeah.
grant. And I think we also put in supplies, like tree trimming supplies, for when, to do
Nice.
some tree trimming workshops for people.
Good.
And I have enough trimmers to do a workshop for like 10 to 15 people now, as long as the workshops are small.
Okay.
Because I've been trying to purchase a couple every year so we can do workshops, but this grant also has money to purchase more,
Nice.
which will be nice.
Yeah.
Because trimming a tree is not that hard. To do it correctly, people just don't know the correct way because we've never been taught.
I know, in that section of Parade Street where I live, just a couple blocks, but there's great variety amongst these trees. They're all planted at the same time because of the way that people hacked away at them.
Yeah, and it's
Like-
funny because once you're trained on how to trim a tree, when you see a tree, I call it, you get the twitch. You want to fix your trimmers and you fix it. And so if we had little urban forest badges, then at least if you couldn't resist, you'd
Yes,
be like,
I would like
big
that.
tree.
I would like that, because I've worked around the neighborhood. Nobody's ever questioned me, but it would be great
Who
to
would
have a.
question you, John, regardless of what you were doing? Oh,
Well,
that's John
you know.
Banco, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, there's this
The rest of us
crazy old
maybe
man
not.
with some pruners, it's like,
But no, that's very exciting. So yes, if you can put together when you want to start going out and let us know. And again, I don't know if that's going to
yeah,
start
let's do that. Let's
immediately
schedule something. Let's schedule something now. Why not? I mean,
Alright.
what else are we doing? I mean, right, we're gonna move forward.
Yes.
And this is our priority, right? I'm not missing something.
No, this is definitely a priority. We need
Okay.
to get moving on this grant.
All right.
Because you've got a report to put in. See, you can put that you have scheduled. And
know,
the next
and-
time you can say that you've completed.
In the meantime, and maybe this is something that we could focus on, is to take a look at the city with Google Maps or whatever, and there's some glaring places where there are no trees.
There are,
And-
and that's why I'm excited to get some of the data, to get this mapping program up and running, because yeah, there's whole sections of the city without trees, and like, I might not even know they're there.
Exactly.
If nobody there's ever requested a tree and never asked to get one cut down, there was no reason for me to ever go to that neighborhood. But I'll drive down streets and they're like, there's no tree
no
on the
trees
whole
here.
block. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I try to make notes, but I have stacks and stacks of notes that aren't entered in the computer, so I don't, there's a lot going on. Well, how about we wait 2 weeks, maybe the week of July 10th, in case the air quality stays bad for a couple days, instead of next week, maybe the following week? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. We
Yeah.
got a holiday coming up and everything. Week of July 10th.
All right, that's a Monday. Or do you want to try to do it Tuesday or Wednesday, the 11th or the 12th? Do you like the 10th? Oh, and a lot of times either like 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning is the nice time to go out, because you don't want to go out too early because people are still sleeping. And then like we could do it like 10 to 11 or 10 to,
Yeah, I could do any of those days.
all right, how about you, Patty?
I will have to get back to you. My calendar is not cooperating, but I will look at that week and get back to you about when's good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll email everybody then.
Wonderful.
Do you want to just do it for an hour, or do you want to do it?
Whatever you think is appropriate.
Okay.
I mean, I'd certainly do it longer than that. I mean,
Okay, maybe an hour and a half,
Yeah.
maybe till noon, depends on what people feel like. Or even if you can only come for an hour and some people stay longer, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. And then after that, the plan is, once we go out with you and we feel comfortable, then you could perhaps provide to us a neighborhood or some houses that we would go to on our own.
Yeah, that's also why I'd like to wait 2 weeks, because then I can try to pull
Okay.
up some neighborhoods that I
Yeah,
know
okay,
that we can focus in on,
yeah.
to see where some of my requests are from. And then the other thing that you could do, that we could also do one day, is I could train you committee members on how to trim trees, because I still have all those baby trees that we planted. There's like 200 baby trees out there who need trimmed. And I
Yeah.
know, and some of them still have, some of them on East, what is it, 28th Street Boulevard. They still have tags and stuff on them.
Yeah.
They
and
have to be cut off. Like, if they're gonna start strangling these baby trees, it makes me crazy.
East of Broad Street there?
Yeah, like on the way to the Walmart on the east side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
From
that
East Avenue to, Broad Street. There's a bunch of new planted trees in the boulevard. And now there's also a bunch of new spaces. So we can also get more trees in there too, because they took down even more dead ones. We planted like 20 trees there, and somebody called me and was like, "We don't have any trees in your boulevard." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I just planted 20 trees there." And I went out and looked, and I was like, "Oh, they don't have very many trees." They went and cut down a whole bunch more
Well,
that had died, so.
I'd be happy to do some of that as a volunteer.
And I think that's one of the things a long time ago that we had suggested, perhaps asked for, was sort of a list of things that if somebody's got an hour of time and they feel comfortable in knowing what to do, is to go and either trim the trees or, make sure that they're just surviving.
Well,
And I
maybe
know
we could
that's
do
a
both
lot
the
of
same
work.
day while you're all there. Maybe
Yeah.
I could do a little trimming workshop with you if we go over to if we meet at the East 28th Street Boulevard. And then we can also go door to door in that neighborhood, because
Yeah.
there are
Yeah, I like
houses
that.
that don't have trees. But
Yeah.
I know that boulevard, those baby trees really need attention.
Then we need to make them a priority if we can.
Okay.
It was funny, the other day I sent our tree crew out to trim a tree, and I'm like, "Well, they're baby trees." And he's like, "He said it's 18 inches. I'm like, "Okay, they're teenagers." But it was young. I don't think it was 18 inches. I'm like, "Okay, they're teenagers then."
Okay.
But it was funny. I
At
call
least-
them baby trees. They're my babies.
Sure. No, I get that. So, yeah, no, that would be good.
All right, well, I'll email Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, like 10 to 11, possibly till
Okay.
noon, and see who's available.
Yeah.
And then I'll get it a specific place where we can meet over there.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And that'll be fun. Yeah, we'll do a
Yes.
door to door and trim. You think you might make it, Paul?
I'm ready.
All right.
You could probably lead the class.
That's that's my old neighborhood, my paper route area. I lived on East Avenue, 27th, 28th.
Yeah, that's true.
And I had 28th, but East Avenue up toward like Reed Street, somewhere around there. So I know where we're at.
All right, great.
Yeah, we'll be a little tree gang.
Yeah,
Another boulevard I'm thinking of, Sarah, but I haven't been across there, is Fairmont Parkway.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess there's probably no trees in that boulevard there,
No,
very
no,
few.
that's not true. She's planted.
I planted 50 trees there.
Okay,
But a lot of them died. And so And a lot of them either didn't get watered or the lawnmowers and weed trimmers hit them. And so that's one of the benefits of also having these gator bags. While the gator bags are on the tree, the weed trimmers can't hit the trunks. So I want to replant. We do need to check the babies to see, but a lot of them died. And then plant new ones in the missing spaces. But I really would like, I don't have permission to do it yet though, to try one of the lawn conversions on one of the blocks on Fairmont Parkway. And so to plant like wildflowers and trees in the boulevard and not mow it. And just to try it out. Because the mowing is a huge expense for the city, and when we try to plant trees, the lawnmowers, they're not paying attention, they're hitting them, or they're hitting the trees with weed trimmers, and then it kills the tree. Because those baby trees are only 1.5 inches wide. If you hit it with a weed trimmer the whole way around, that kills it. You're ringing the whole tree and it dies.
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up because the other week I was walking from my neighborhood down to the zoo on the sidewalk, and there was a young man, and I took a video of him. He wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just a really good opportunity on 38th Street as you're going down to Glenwood Park, I think it is. The hills there are just so steep, and this poor guy is on his riding mower, and he's backing up and so forth. It is dangerous for him to do that, in my opinion, for this little strip of grass that is used for what purpose. So I would very much like to see some of these areas converted to no-mow, wildflowers, ground cover, whatever, because it's expensive, it's dangerous, it's noisy.
Yeah.
So I would be, and I did, I took just a couple snippets of video. Again, he was not doing anything wrong, and he did ask, are you okay? And it's like, yeah, I'm fine. But his mower was still going, and I was walking, so it's like, nope, everything's good. But it was just a good opportunity to take just a couple of seconds of video to say, this is not safe, and it is very expensive, and
Right, because there's lots of low-growing plants. I mean,
Yeah.
just because it's a boulevard doesn't mean you won't be able to see through. We can plant
well,
plants
and
that
this
are
is actually
low-growing.
to the side,
And then that, yeah,
where
on
they
private
have those
property, that's
retaining
different.
walls already. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why would we not just put something there that would grow? So, and again, that just happens to be in my neighborhood. I'm sure there are lots of other areas. And I know that that's something that a lot of cities are trying to do. When I lived in Akron, it was called the Devil's Strip, between where the curb is and where the sidewalk is. And they were certainly trying to get people to grow different things.
Yeah, we need some more demonstration projects, because you do see some alternative landscapes out there that are flowers and stuff, and people don't have to mow them.
I have one.
Yeah, but it'd be nice. It'd be nice, and like we should also set up like a little tour or something, because I don't think people know how attractive they can look.
Exactly.
So whenever I'm driving down the street, I see one, I always pull over and try to take pictures, so like I can put a presentation or something together, because people just assume they look like weeds, and that's not true.
There are lots of different options, and it is becoming more mainstream now that there are articles and articles in the newspaper and magazines and that sort of thing, that it's becoming more important. And I was just reading an article about Salt Lake City, and they, of course, were doing lots of green grass and whatever. Well, they are now going to alternatives. Their environment is, of course, different than ours, but it was indicative
Xeriscaping.
of the problem, is that it doesn't make sense to have turf grass everywhere. And it's a matter of giving people an idea to do something different. So,
Yeah, it'd be nice, we need to come up with, maybe as part of our education for the DCNR grant, that we could come up with some kind of a pamphlet or a handout for the lawn conversion to describe what natural
Yeah.
plantings look like, and to encourage people to do it.
Yeah.
Because even I have property out in the county, and my neighbor it used to be a hay field, and so they would let the grasses grow up and mow it once a year, and then the grass grows back, and so there's hundreds of butterflies and grasshoppers. The new owner tried to turn it into a lawn, and they mow it like a golf course. It's the bears, and it makes me insane. And I keep telling my husband, I need to mail them a meadow pamphlet anonymously.
There's miles and miles of that in Erie County. It's
Yes.
It makes me
it's
crazy.
It is crazy.
What are the butterflies and the bees and the grasshoppers supposed to
Yeah,
live? It's insane.
Yeah, people don't understand either that lawns aren't the same as trees when it comes to stormwater. I mean, the reason that we have these flooding situations is because lawns can only absorb a fraction of what trees absorb in terms of rainwater. So you get a heavy rain, it runs off of lawns.
Yeah, so I think the sooner that we can start with the education, the better. And perhaps that's one of the things that we could do, is we could all submit to you some suggestions of where alternatives to lawn are, and post them on our website, the city's
and maybe we could
website.
partner with Master Gardeners on that too, creating a pamphlet or a brochure or something.
We'd be happy to. Yeah.
And
And
I know
that's
that's
one of,
something Fred is working on too, I think.
yeah, one of the other things that just popped in my mind is signage for the meadow. Are there funds in the grant for signage and public education? Because that
Yes.
was one of the points that Chris made when he came to talk to us about the
Yes,
tiny
otherwise people
forest.
don't know what it is.
Exactly.
They think
And-
you're just not mowing.
Yeah, and knocking on people's doors. Yeah, I was talking to people about No Mow May, and they were like, "What is that?" Okay,
Yeah, signs are very important for those,
yeah.
for the lawn conversion areas.
And when we're walking and talking to people about trees, we may want to suggest that as well. We might stay at one house for an hour.
Yeah, and the signage that I prefer is, because they used to say no mow zone, but I like to call it a grow zone too. So we
Yeah.
have some sample signs that have already been used in Frontier that we can either use them as is or tweak the wording.
Yeah, and some places will say habitat restoration or.
I like just calling them like wild flower meadows or pollinator meadows.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
you know, the one we planted in Frontier along,
Alongside the Bayfront Parkway, made a huge impact. It makes an impact when you're in the park. For the festival, Blues and Jazz Festival, we used to have to put traffic barriers and yellow tape all the way along that strip to keep people from driving up over that curb in their four-wheel drives, you know?
Yeah.
And that immediately ended.
Oh, nice.
You know, people see that, you can't, that's not a place you can drive to, you know? So, and we don't have to mow that whole long strip of it too. There's several hours of, every week or two that somebody isn't mowing that.
Yeah, it turned out really nice. Even my boss, Mr. Zisk, the director of Public Works, commented, "Oh, we should put in a meadow like they did over at Frontier Park." And I was almost shocked and dropped my papers. And I was like, "Yeah, we definitely should do that."
Well, see, there again, we need examples of where those nice places are that we can post pictures and locations for people to look at, to give people ideas, because people
Yeah.
just think, oh, I've got to have a lawn because that's what everybody else in the neighborhood has. So,
and we
excellent.
need to emphasize the importance of native species too.
Yes,
And the problem with invasives.
yes.
So like ground cover, like, you know, we could plant English ivy and vinca and pachysandra on the on the medians.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, they would certainly do fine there and serve the purpose, but, you know, if you go into any of our parks, they're being taken over by those species, from people dumping their lawn waste at the edge of the park, and then takes over.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And there again, we just have to educate people about the importance of it. And I know that the Master Watershed Program was working with the Master Gardeners on surveying, not surveying,
Yes,
but
the Master Watershed. program.
Yes, they were talking to our local garden supply companies, nurseries, about native plants. I have not seen that information yet, but that was one of the things that they were talking about, because it's fortunately becoming more mainstream, because when I moved here in 2007 and asked about native plants, nobody knew what I was talking about. So we've come a long way, but still got a long way to go.
Yeah, it's changing fast, maybe not fast enough, but
No, no,
And the more that people see them, the more
yeah.
people realize.
That's why I think if we can get an example,
Well, it's funny because a
Listing.
lot of our native plants are still beautiful,
Oh,
and
they're
they'll grow them in
gorgeous.
Europe. Like in Europe, they grow goldenrod, where we think it's a weed. So, like I told John, like the joke is, I always say, "Well, that's not a weed, that's solidago," but it's Latin to make it sound all fancy. It's solidago.
all right, you're ahead of us as usual. Yeah, no, that's important too. So, okay, good.
all right, well, the other thing that,
I want to, we're almost out of time already, to push is developing this plan.
Did you two get a copy?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I took them copies. So, and everybody on the committee has seen this and has a copy of it, I think, at some point.
It's just the community tree plan that we talked about, a guide for tree commissions and environmental advisory councils. Oh, that means we can share this with the new AC that's being formed.
yes, yeah, that's for them as well, yeah. And so, in order to move this plan forward, we need somebody who's gonna actually sit down and draft it. So can we hire somebody to do that with the DCNR grant, or do we have to come up with some funds from elsewhere?
I'll have to look into it.
Because I think, you know, we can talk about it until somebody sits down and does the grunt work of actually drafting a plan based on what we agree are the important things.
Yeah, I can talk with our planning department.
Okay.
To see if they have any capacity for that.
Okay.
Or if we can use funds to hire a consultant, because I don't think it would take too awfully long.
No, I don't think so either. And, you know, I'm sure that a planning person would say, well, you know, here's what I need to know in order to develop a plan. And then that comes back to us to determine what our vision is, what you know, what our values are, what it is that we want to achieve through this plan.
Yeah, and I can even request if I could use some of the tree funding for that also, like my regular general fund money.
Okay.
Because it'd be nice to have this planned so we know what we're doing.
Yes.
Instead of just responding to requests as they come in, like what is our plan? What are our goals? What are we really working for? I mean, obviously our goal is to plant as many trees as we possibly can, and preferably natives, but it would be better to have more information than that.
Well, and we've come up with some of those things about what our goals were, you know, education being a big part of it, and planting native trees, but also, you know, the undergrowth that needs to be there as well. But it would be nice to have it in a nice handy dandy little plan that we can say, here, Paul, this is our plan. This is what the city is committed to doing. And
Yeah, we have most of the information already,
Yeah,
but it's just
and-
taking the time to put it all together and making it look pretty. That's
Yes.
why it probably wouldn't take that much money.
No, but something that we could
That's a good
also
idea.
go back to presenting it to the city council so that they know what's going on, and what our plan is as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea, John, to try to just hire somebody
Yeah.
to finish it.
But yeah, I think, you know, we've been talking about it for a long time, and
None of us has said, oh, all right, I'm going to take the next couple of days and work on this. You know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the way to get it done, is to hire somebody
Yeah.
or use somebody in the city if we can. That'd be even better, but whatever. Somebody's.
Have funding for it. It'd be nice to also reach out to people that we don't normally talk to about trees, like do business, the commercial business owners have something to say about it that we don't know, like does industry, are there sections of the community we're missing that haven't talked to? I mean, it'd be nice to do some information gathering from the citizens and the different community members too, if we could. If there's money for that, but it would be nice.
Okay, so after all this talking, Sarah's got a lot to do, of course. So
With businesses, before you move on, like,
Yeah.
people think if you plant a tree in front of your store, they're not gonna see your sign.
yeah, I
But
know
really-
they think that, but it's
But
all.
if you plant it, it's centered right in front of your sign, people are looking ahead when they're driving, so it's that diagonal view. And when they're coming from the other, so by the time you're right here, nobody's looking there, so it isn't blocking their sign. When they plant it off to the side, that's when it blocks their sign. And so like, there's things to take into consideration that we could have in the plan as recommendations and stuff too. I'm sorry to not let you go on, but
No,
there's
that's
just
right.
basic information that people don't realize.
Yep,
Or like the tree's blocking it now, but it's gonna grow past it, and then we can trim those branches.
yep, yep.
It's an 80-foot tall tree, it's not a 12-foot tall tree.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I just, was my first meeting, but how do we communicate to the public what we're doing or what we're thinking, or can we use, is there a Facebook page to maybe like a monthly spotlight type thing, like,
We don't have that now, but it's something we need to make. But I personally don't know how to make it. And so I don't know if anybody, and nobody at the city seems to have time. I mean, I can ask IT again, I just don't know how to get it done.
or even piggyback onto
who to
the
ask.
Erie City Facebook page, something
Yeah,
like
and so
that?
I think we could post stuff like that to it, but I just don't know, or do we just need to bite the bullets and make our own Facebook page and then do it
Okay.
ourselves? I mean, Jamie was really good at that, but that's the other thing I wanted to mention. Jamie, since she has her new job at the art museum, she hasn't been able to make a lot of these meetings, and so she is thinking that she needs to leave the committee because it's getting harder and harder for her to make these meetings. And she suggested perhaps someone else from Leaf would like to join, because she originally joined when she worked at Leaf, and it
Yeah.
fit in more to her role
Well-
there.
Grace would be great.
Well, maybe we could ask Grace then,
Yeah.
because Jamie hates to leave, and especially doesn't want to leave us hanging, but at the same time, she feels like she's not contributing that much since she's taken this new job and hasn't hardly made any meetings. And, you know, most of our events she's been too busy at because she has her own events at the art museum, and she just has a lot going on with her new job. Or we can think about, too, if anybody has any other suggestions of folks they would like to suggest. But I was excited we found someone to replace Ginny so quick. Yay!
Well, I got a lot of ideas kicking around, I just want to make sure I
No,
don't
that's
overload.
great. Because we have talked about connecting to the city's website, if we could have our own little section, or Facebook, or something of that nature, because we do have a lot of information, and it
Yeah.
would be nice to be able to tell people, here, go to this location and review some of these materials.
I'll ask our IT department how they want us to handle that. Can we share the city's website, or do they want us to just create our own? And then we'll go from there on how to make that happen. Because like I said, Jamie was supposed to be working on that with me, but that's also one of the things that kept pushing off because she's been busy. So we'll have to,
Well,
I have
again,
to step up my game on that one.
since
Yeah,
we've
because
got
I
a
heard
little-
also awful lot of great ideas that I know there's people in this community that would thrive on that and want to get involved. It's just, we need to get that message out.
Yeah. Do you know how to do websites, Paul?
With that,
Do you know how to do websites and Facebook pages?
I do, actually. I manage the Erie, Pennsylvania Sportfish Association's
Oh, well, maybe you could
Facebook
help me
page.
figure it out.
And I'd be okay with doing that. Or we could just get the stuff together and submit it to whoever runs the City of Erie Facebook page. And
Okay, I'll ask them which way they
because
want
I
us
know
to do it.
I've shared a lot of things. I think it's the Bayfront neighborhood. They had cleanups and things like that. And so there's a page called Erie in Need, and it's like the free movies in the park and things like that. And I know I share a lot of that. But like if we have trees that we can give out and say, hey, somebody in their neighborhood need a tree in their area, and we just put that information out there, it's free. I mean, and it's going to reach a lot of people.
Yeah, because for some reason, there's a little misconception about how the program works. I think people think I have to go order 50 trees and then 50 people have to get them. So they'll call me and say, well, do you have any trees? Well, I never have trees. You have to request a tree and then I'll get one for you because the city, you know what I mean?
But
And so
how
I don't
many
think
people
people
even know to
don't
call
always
you?
understand. You ask for one and then when we get a bunch of people together, we'll get you one. I don't have like all these trees sitting around in the back parking lot waiting to be planted, you know?
Right.
And so, you're right, I think people really don't understand. So the more information we can get out there, the better.
Or even like you guys were talking about, an empty lot, that maybe we get some seedlings and we have a nursery. I know volunteers are hard to get, but I'm sure we could get some people that volunteer to raise those trees to a larger size and more success rate.
Leaf is trying out a couple little nurseries, and I think so's the Master Watershed Stewards put in a little nursery.
Yeah, they working with I think another DCNR funding, have planted green stake nurseries. We planted one at Leaf, right down along the creek to north of the park, and they were supposed to plant a couple more too. I don't know where else, but and those are, that one at least is well established and coming along. We'll have green stakes to you know, you can plant lots of places, and especially in your, I'm sure you're aware of, if you're involved in the fishery aspect of tree planting, that those riparian plantings are one of the most important things we can do.
Yes.
So,
All right, Armando or Steph, did you have anything before we end the meeting?
I sent something email because the chat wasn't working in the Zoom, but it's just a link to the resource that I use a lot for, like native plant, meadowscaping, long-term trends, looking at species and stuff like that. So just put it up.
What is that website, Steph?
It's the Complete Indigenous Landscapes, and the website is so
can't understand you.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. It's hard to hear you.
Could she just email it to us?
Oh, could you email it to us instead then?
Yes, I did. I already emailed it
Oh, great. Thanks, Stephanie.
to the connect.
All right. How about you, Armando?
I think he slipped away.
I think everything's going good. Yeah, I think it's a good plan so far.
All right, great. Thanks.
All right. Well, we're a little past one.
I do have one last thing, I'm sorry. If you would, take a quick look at the Birdtown, PA.
Oh, yeah, I wanted
That was a really exciting presentation that I attended through the Audubon Society. And I'm going to try and get her as a speaker to Master Gardeners via Zoom. But a lot of the material is on their website, it's available. And one of the key things is the importance and the connection of native plants to having good bird life.
Yep.
And so it's just another program and another opportunity to educate the public. And they have a lot of the materials sort of already prepared and a program and whatever. So I would really like for us to look at that as a possibility. Like I said, I'm already very excited about it. The Audubon Society they weren't going to necessarily do anything with it, but I said, well, you know, if I work to get some people connected, and this is something that we would like to apply for, because the city would need to apply for it, and they do prefer to have it as a city and not for the county. They'd like to work with smaller areas. Exactly. And again, it's another public education opportunity.
If you get that scheduled for a Zoom for the Master Gardeners, could you invite the Urban Forest Committee members to?
I
also
will
do
make that
if they're
happen.
interested?
Yeah, I'll
If
make
it's
that
possible,
happen.
even
Yeah.
though we're not official.
That's fine. I will
great.
make that happen because, again, there were a couple of master gardeners on the same call, and they were excited about the possibility of hearing the presentation again and us actually doing something with it. But like I said, the link that's there has some very good information. They seem very well organized. And so it would just be, like I said, another opportunity and another avenue to educate people and make the connection between we've got to have the flora in order to have the fauna or whatever.
Yep.
And the
Yeah,
avian
absolutely.
and that
There-
sort of
it's
stuff.
totally connected.
It's an ecosystem that we've got to work on.
That's right.
here.
It's all the same thing, yes.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So, okay, but yeah, I will work on scheduling that.
Thanks, Patty.
No, thank you.
You know, I'm a huge advocate for Doug Tallamy's work, and
Yes,
he makes it very clear that the crash in the bird population is directly related to the removal of trees.
yes, exactly,
Yep.
exactly. So, yeah. Okay, good, thank you.
All
And
right.
thank you.
Anything else? Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.